Okay, so in this short video, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some basics about proportion and drawing related to the portrait so that you can be better prepared for when it's time to do your actual self-portrait drawing. Now, I borrowed this image off the internet. I don't know who did it, but it seems it's a good example of kind of where we want to go and how we want to do the shading. Also, I'll use this as a way of talking a little bit about what I want you to do with this portrait and things to do and things to avoid. Okay, so the first thing is when you draw your portrait, um, the head is, the top of the hair is not technically the top of the hair. The top of the head is the skull. And sometimes people's hair is close to their skull, sometimes it goes way above their skull. So, for the purposes of what I'm about to talk about, by head, I mean chin to the top of the skull. And so we look at the eyes, they are exactly halfway between the chin and the top of the skull. Um, Now, everything I say in this little presentation is a generalization. This is kind of a generic head. Obviously, people are different. Some people's eyes might be slightly higher, some people's eyes might be slightly lower, but generally speaking, they're at about the halfway point. And this is important because most people tend to draw the eyes up here. In other words, they really shrink this part of the head and they exaggerate this part of the head. And we do that for obvious reasons. Things that are more interesting, we make bigger, and things that are less interesting, we make smaller. So keep that in mind when you come to your portrait. Another way of dividing the proportion of the head is called the rule of thirds, which says from the top of the forehead to the eyebrows is 1/3, from the eyebrows to the nose is 2/3, from the nose to the chin is another third. So a third, a third, and a third. However you want to approach it, it doesn't matter. It's good to use both techniques and just use them as cross-reference for each other. So the eyes are about halfway. So to begin your portrait, you might want to begin by kind of sketching your head like an oval, an upside down egg, pointier at the bottom, rounder at the top, and then find roughly the halfway point, and that's going to be where the eyes are generally. Um, when it comes to the space between the eyes, the distance between the eyes is usually equal to about one eye. So take that distance and it should roughly fit inside between the two. Again, everybody's different, but this is a rough rule of thumb. Um, when it comes to drawing the eye, we connect the outside corner and the inside corner. You see that most of the curve on the eye is above the eye. At the bottom of the eye has a very, very slight curve, and in some people, it can even appear to be almost perfectly straight. So when you want to avoid the temptation of making the eye look like an almond, so that we draw a line from the middle, the top and the bottom are exactly the same. Can it be like that? Yes, it can, but is it often like that? No, it's not. So notice that the bottom of the eye is often straighter, less curved than the top of the eye. And we can demonstrate that if I take the eye and flip it upside down, in this strange image, you can see this is where most of the curve is, and this is relatively straight. But these are kinds of things we don't really notice too much when we're looking at faces. The width of the nose, roughly speaking, lines up with the inside of the eyes. And the outside of the mouth, roughly speaking, lines up with the irises and sometimes the pupils even, depending on how big the mouth is. So again, use sight lines to help you with these drawings and help you with the proportions. Ears are a very interesting feature of the face. They're actually much bigger than most people think they are. The bottom of the ear, we to do a sight line, and this is assuming the head is looking forward. If the head's looking slightly down or slightly up, it all changes. So this is a very generic head looking straight forward, which I'm assuming most of you are going to have for your self-portrait. But notice that the bottom of the ears will often be somewhere between the nose and the mouth, the upper lip of the mouth. And the top of the ear is usually between the eye and the eyebrows. So depending on the size of the ear, it's going to go from this region all the way down to this region. They're much, much bigger than people think. When it comes to drawing the mouth and the nose, be careful because there are no lines. The only line in the mouth is through the middle. The whole bottom lip and the whole top lip are done with shading. The top lip is generally darker than the bottom lip. That's because it's facing down, and the bottom lip is facing up towards the light. The line of the mouth has line weight. It changes, often thinner in the middle, thicker in some places and then really thick, usually towards the outside. The nose does not have any lines on it except for the bottom. So the line of the nostrils and the line of the outside of the nostrils, but try to avoid the temptation of drawing lines up the nose. So most of the nose is done with shading. And a really good way to think about it is to imagine that there's a sphere in the middle. So you could sketch a little ball right here, and the bottom of the ball would be the top of the nostrils, and then you kind of curve out. Notice also that shading of the nose goes under here. So the lightest part of the nose is up there. All right, so hair, be very careful with hair not to do too many straight lines, kind of like this person did. You can have them in places, but mostly hair is going to be patches of light and dark. So notice that this hair is all the same, gray. There's not much variation, a little bit darker here than up here. But what I want you to look for is, you're going to go really dark in places, especially if you have black hair, especially down behind the ears, and the neck and the chin. In the top, you're generally going to have more light for obvious reasons. So look for the changes. Here you can see kind of a light piece, and here's a light piece. We get a little bit darker in here, a little bit darker there. So look for these tonal changes and put the occasional lines for the hair. When you're drawing the eye, look for the shape of the space between the eyebrow and the eye. Often they're not exactly the same. These are fairly similar, not exact. Eyes can be different. Also the eyelid, depending on the type of eye, there's a line that goes above the eye. That has a shape. Sometimes it's really high in the middle of the eye, and then it slopes down towards the outside of the eye. Sometimes it follows it pretty regularly in this drawing. Often it's different on both sides, and sometimes it doesn't exist at all. So look for the shape of the eyelid, the shape of the negative space between the eyes, the shape of the nostrils. Are they kind of angular? Are they very round? Are they big? Are they small? And then the shape of the openings of the nostrils. What do they look like? Okay, so that's a few basics to keep in mind with your self-portrait. I wish you luck.